You know, usually when we talk about building a machine, there is this like expectation of absolute undeniable logic.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you put gas in a car, the engine burns it, the wheels turn. It is just a direct input-output situation.
Exactly. The machine doesn't just, wake up one morning and decide it would rather burn orange juice instead of gasoline.
No, of course not.
It doesn't have an existential crisis on the highway.
Hmm.
You do action A, and result B happens every single time.
Yeah.
It's completely predictable.
But then you look at personal finance, and suddenly that beautiful, logical machine is absolutely infested with gremlins.
Oh, completely.
You put the money in, you set the budget, but instead of the wheels turning smoothly toward retirement, the doors fall off, the steering wheel detaches, and you find yourself buying, like, a jet ski you can't afford at 2 in the morning.
Yep.
The math is incredibly simple, but our human wiring just gets in the way of the logic.
Which is really the ultimate behavioral short circuit, right? I mean, we look at a spreadsheet and know exactly what we're mathematically supposed to do.
Spend less than you make, invest the rest.
Right. But our brains actively fight against that logic every step of the way because we are wired for survival in the present, not wealth in the future.
And that conflict between math and psychology is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are giving you a shortcut to mastering personal finance.
Yes, we are.
We are bypassing the Wall Street jargon, skipping the lectures, and giving you a clear, actionable toolkit. To do this, we've pulled together a massive stack of source material spanning both the hard numbers of financial literacy and the deep behavioral psychology of why we make the choices we do.
It's a really fascinating mix.
It really is. We're looking at a goal-setting worksheet from Christchurch, fundamental financial literacy guides from AIA and UPenn, practical saving tips from Northern Insight and Think Money.
And that academic study from the International Journal of Scientific Research and Engineering Development?
Yes, the IJSR-Red study on investor psychology, plus some really hard-hitting investment analysis from the Motley Fool and Charles Stanley.
So the overarching mission for this deep dive is to bridge that exact gap you just mentioned. We need to connect the mechanics of money-like, the actual step-by-step of how to budget and save with the psychology of money.
Right.
We want to expose the hidden mechanisms in your brain that are actively fighting against your financial success. And once you see those blind spots, we can show you how to build long-term generational wealth without needing to be some kind of day trading financial insider.
Okay, let's unpack this, because you absolutely cannot build lasting wealth without pouring a concrete foundation first.
No, you can't.
Before we even utter the words stock market or compound interest, we have to look at daily cash flow. And if you look at the foundations of goal setting, having a vague desire is, well, essentially useless.
A vague desire is really just a wish that makes you feel bad.
Exactly.
Saying, I want to be rich, or I want to stop stressing about my credit card bill. It gives your brain zero actionable direction. To actually change your financial trajectory, you have to turn those desires into SMART goals.
Like the Christchurch worksheet outlines.
Yes. That stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And the research suggests mapping these out across 1, 5, and 10-year horizons so you have an actual roadmap.
So saying I want an emergency fund is that useless wish.
Yeah.
That's saying I'm going to save 1,000 pounds in the next 12 months by setting up an automatic transfer of 20 pounds every single Friday. That is a SMART goal.
Exactly. You've made it highly specific.
Yeah, you can measure it every week. It's realistic for your income, and you've given it a hard 12-month deadline.
And once you have that deadline, you need a daily framework to actually hit it, which brings us to the guardrails of budgeting. A very common baseline strategy from the AIA guidelines is the 50-30-20 rule.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the concept is that you allocate 50% of your take-home pay to absolute necessities, things like your rent, groceries, and utilities.
Okay.
Then 30% goes to discretionary wants, like dining out or streaming services. And the final 20% is strictly fenced off for savings and debt repayment.
Which sounds incredibly clean and elegant on a whiteboard.
Oh, sure.
But for a lot of people, their brain just doesn't categorize money that neatly in the real world.
Yeah.
I mean, when you are standing in a grocery store, you aren't calculating percentages.
No, nobody does that.
That's why I love some of the alternative strategies UPenn outlines. For instance, the envelope budget strategy.
Oh, that's a great one.
You literally take your spending categories and put cash or use digital sub-accounts into designated envelopes. When the dining out envelope is empty on the 20th of the month, you stop eating out.
You're just done.
Right. The physical friction of an empty envelope forces you to stop.
It makes the abstract concept of remaining funds incredibly tangible.
Yeah.
Another highly structured alternative is the zero-based budget.
I really love the mechanism behind this one. It's like running a tight company where every single dollar gets a job description.
Yes, exactly.
If your monthly take-home pay is $3,000, you sit down on a first of the month and assign every single dollar to a specific expense, a savings goal, or a debt payment until your remaining unassigned balance hits exactly zero.
Yep. Every dollar is accounted for before it ever leaves your account. The intentionality is what makes that work.
Total control.
But the UPenn literature also frequently mentions the pay yourself first method. This flips the script entirely.
How so?
Instead of saving whatever happens to be left over at the end of the month, which, let's be honest, is usually nothing, you set up an automated transfer to route money directly into your savings account the very second your paycheck clears before you pay a single bill.
I have to push back on this one, though.
Okay, wait on it.
If someone is genuinely living paycheck to paycheck, which a huge portion of the population is, isn't paying themselves first a recipe for missing the rent?
Yeah.
It feels a bit, I don't know, tone deaf to tell someone who is struggling to cover basic utilities to just route money to savings first and figure the rest out later.
That is the most common and frankly most valid critique of that method. If you blindly route money to savings without knowing your fixed costs, you will crash the car.
Right.
This is exactly why UPenn and AIA advocate so strongly for tracking every single penny of your outgoings, as Northern Insight puts it, for at least a month before you attempt any automated savings.
Ah, okay.
You cannot realistically pay yourself first if you don't know exactly what your 50% necessity bucket looks like. Tracking your expenses is like running a diagnostic on your cash flow.
You have to know what's leaving.
Exactly. It reveals the hidden leaks, the subscriptions you forgot about, the daily conveniences that add up. Once you plug those leaks and know your true baseline, paying yourself first transforms from a dangerous gamble into a mechanism for guaranteed frictionless growth.
Okay, so the tracking builds the awareness and the budget builds the guardrails. But once you have those guardrails in place, what actually happens to that savings bucket?
That is the big question.
Because it feels like before we talk about growing wealth, the immediate screaming priority has to be protecting the budget from life's inevitable surprises.
Protecting the budget from shocks is step one, period. The standard advice you hear everywhere, including from AIA, is to keep 3 to 6 months of living expenses in a liquid emergency fund.
Which is a lot of money.
It is. And we have to look at the reality on the ground. Think Money points out a really stark reality. 1 in 10 people in the UK have zero savings whatsoever, none.
Wow.
And 21% have less than £1,000.
When you are in that precarious position, hearing a financial guru tell you to just go ahead and save 6 months of expenses, I mean, it's completely paralyzing.
Absolutely paralyzing.
The gap between 0 and 6 months of rent is so massive that it feels impossible. So you don't even start. It's too overwhelming.
Which is why the most practical advice is to throw the 6-month rule out the window when you were just starting. The immediate step is to focus on a micro target. Aim for a foundational safety net of just £500 to £1,000.
Breaking it down makes it a math equation instead of a mountain.
Exactly.
Saving just £50 a week gets you to 500 in 10 weeks. That is a tangible, achievable win that builds momentum. And the sources point out that simply auditing your spending can find this money quickly.
Oh, for sure.
Cutting just one £20 a month subscription yields £240 a year. Or if you get a windfall like a tax refund or a work bonus, you institute a strict rule. 50% of it goes straight to the savings, and you can enjoy the other 50%.
Those micro targets build the muscle memory of saving. And having that initial safety net is absolutely crucial because it acts as a shield against the debt trap.
Right.
When your car breaks down or the boiler stops working, you don't have to reach for a credit card. And speaking of credit cards, Northern Insight establishes a critical distinction in personal finance. Not all debt is inherently evil.
Okay.
The financial world draws a hard line between good debt and bad debt.
Good debt being borrowing that actually supports long-term value growth.
Yep.
So taking out a mortgage for a house that will appreciate, or taking a student loan that statistically increases your lifetime earning potential.
Exactly.
Whereas bad debt is taking on high-interest liabilities for things that immediately lose value, like using a credit card with a 24% interest rate to buy designer clothes, or taking out a predatory payday loan.
The metrics on managing this from AIA are pretty clear. Your total debt-to-income ratio, your DTI, which is the percentage of your monthly gross income that goes toward paying debts, should absolutely max out at 55%.
And even that feels high.
It is high. If you are ever applying for a mortgage or a major loan, lenders ideally want to see that ratio sitting much lower, around 25 to 30%.
Makes sense.
But Charles Stanley warns that the danger of bad debt isn't just the initial purchase, it's the underlying mechanics of how interest works against you. If you miss payments or only pay the minimum, you encounter something called capitalized interest.
Oh, let's break that down because it is terrifying. Capitalized interest means the unpaid interest on your debt gets added to your principal balance.
Yeah.
So if you owe $1,000 and generate $50 in interest that you don't pay off, your new balance is $1,050. The next month, you aren't just being charged interest on the original 1,000, you are being charged interest on the interest.
It creates this sort of mathematical death spiral.
It really does. But this brings up a huge question for me. If the math on high-interest debt is that undeniably toxic, and we all vaguely know that credit card debt is bad, why is it that so many of us fall into the bad debt trap anyway?
It's a great question.
Is it just a universal lack of discipline, or is something else happening under the hood when we make money choices?
It is definitely not just a lack of discipline. This is the pivot point where we have to transition from the mechanics of money into the messy reality of human psychology.
The gremlins.
Yes, the gremlins. Our brains are hardwired with deeply ingrained cognitive biases. These biases act like distorted lenses, making objectively terrible financial decisions feel perfectly logical, even necessary, in the heat of the moment.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we are shifting from what we should do to the psychological mechanisms of why we spectacularly fail to do it.
Totally.
When you look at the IJSR Red study of 81 investors, they basically sorted these money mistakes into two main buckets, right? The heuristic-driven shortcuts and the emotion-driven panic buttons.
Let's look at the heuristic-driven bucket first. Heuristics are basically mental shortcuts. Our brains are constantly bombarded with information, so they create shortcuts to make decisions faster.
Right.
But in investing, these shortcuts are disastrous. A prime example is anchoring. Anchoring is when your brain fixates on the very first piece of information it receives, the anchor, and judges everything else against it, regardless of actual value.
So if I walk into a store and see a TV priced at $2,000, and then next to it is a TV marked down from $2,000 to $1,000, my brain anchors to that $2,000 price tag.
Yeah.
Suddenly, $1,000 feels like an incredible steal, even if the TV itself is made of cheap parts and is only objectively worth $500. I buy it because my brain is chasing the feeling of the discount, not analyzing the true value of the asset.
That exact same mechanism destroys stock market portfolios. People see a stock that used to trade at $100 drop to $50. They anchor to the $100 price, assume it's on sale, and buy it without ever researching if the company is actually going bankrupt.
Wow. And then we have the emotion-driven bucket, which is arguably even stronger, things like loss aversion.
Oh, loss aversion is fascinating because it proves we are not rational actors. Mathematically, $50 is $50. But psychologically, the pain of losing $50 feels roughly twice as intense as the joy of finding $50 on the sidewalk.
That's wild.
Because our brains weigh losses so much heavier than gains, investors will panic and sell off all their investments at the very bottom of a market crash. The psychological pain of watching the numbers drop overrides the logical knowledge that markets historically recover.
We also see herding, which is just following the crowd because there is safety in numbers, and availability bias, where we make huge financial choices based entirely on whatever dramatic news headline we read that morning, completely ignoring decades of long-term data.
Exactly.
But what really caught my eye in the research were the demographic differences in how these biases show up.
The demographic splits are incredibly telling. When researchers looked at gender, they found zero difference in how these biases presented. Men and women were equally susceptible across the board.
Okay, but age?
Age revealed a massive divide. Investors under the age of 35 were highly overconfident and heavily influenced by anchoring. They truly believed they could outsmart the market.
Oh,
right. On the flip side, investors over 45 were heavily driven by loss aversion. They had built their wealth and were absolutely terrified of losing it, making them overly conservative.
But the most counterintuitive finding in all of the research, the one that just blew my mind, was the relationship between financial literacy and these cognitive biases.
Yeah.
You would naturally assume that the more you read about finance, the more educated and rational you become. But the data shows that higher financial literacy actually correlates with higher overconfidence.
That's so
It
backwards.
really is. It's like someone taking exactly 3 karate classes and suddenly believing they're fully equipped to fight a grizzly bear. The little bit of knowledge doesn't make them safer. It gives them a false sense of invincibility that puts them in more danger.
What's fascinating here is that education alone does not erase human emotion.
Hmm.
Just because you understand the mechanical definition of a stock or a bond doesn't mean your brain stops using those heuristic shortcuts.
Right.
In fact, knowing the jargon makes you trust your flawed instincts even more. You convince yourself you're making an educated guess when really you were just anchoring or following the herd like everyone else.
That is genuinely scary.
Because our brains are this reliably flawed, the ultimate conclusion is that we cannot trust our own impulses. We need investment strategies that physically protect us from our own psychology.
Which brings us to the ultimate showdown in wealth building, active versus passive investing.
Here we go.
If we know for a fact that we are overconfident, prone to anchoring, and terrible at handling losses, how do we invest safely?
The answer across the board is that you have to choose boring, steady, automated investment vehicles that harness the power of time rather than trying to constantly outsmart the market.
So let's talk about ETFs, or exchange-traded funds, which the Motley Fool breaks down for us. Let's look at the mechanics. You have passive ETFs. These are funds that simply track a major index, like the S&P 500, which is just the 500 largest companies in the US. There is no human trying to pick winners. A computer just automatically buys a tiny slice of all 500 companies.
Yes.
Because it's completely automated and hands-off, the fees are microscopic, usually around 0.10%.
On the other side, you have active ETFs. These are run by highly paid human fund managers who sit in fancy offices, actively buying and selling stocks every day, trying to beat the market average.
And you're paying for those fancy offices.
Exactly. Because you have to pay the salaries of those managers, and because constant trading generates costs, the fees are significantly higher, averaging around 0.69%.
And a 0.5% difference in fees might sound like absolutely nothing right now.
Oh, but it is?
When you apply that difference to hundreds of thousands of dollars over 30 years of investing, that tiny 0.5% eats a massive hole in your total wealth. It pays for the manager's yacht, not yours.
It really does.
But here is the part that drives me crazy. Despite passive funds having mathematically lower fees, the market data notes that 80% of all new ETF launches projected for 2026 are actively managed.
80%.
Yet, when you look at the actual performance data from the SPBVA scorecard in 2025, 79% of active large-cap funds completely underperformed the simple S&P 500 index.
Yep.
If you zoom out to a 10-year period, only 24% of active ETFs managed to beat their benchmarks.
It's a tiny fraction.
So let me ask you, if passive investing consistently demonstrably beats active investing year after year, why on earth are 80% of new funds actively managed? I'll admit, even I feel the temptation to try and pick the next big tech stock, but the math says it's a loser's game.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it goes right back to those exact cognitive biases we just diagnosed. Wall Street is not stupid. They are incredibly aware that individual investors suffer from overconfidence and representativeness. We desperately want to believe we are the exception to the rule, and we love chasing whatever trend was hot last year.
Ah, of course.
Active ETFs don't just sell financial products. They sell the illusion of control. They sell the alluring promise of beating the crowd. It appeals directly to our flawed ego.
So we pay for the ego boost.
Yes. People will gladly pay a 0.69% fee for a mere 24% chance of feeling smarter than their neighbor. Wall Street is literally monetizing our overconfidence.
That is wild. They're weaponizing our own brains against our wallets.
They absolutely are. And Charles Stanley points out that the only proven antidote to this frantic, ego-driven trading is the quiet, boring power of compounding.
Which Einstein supposedly called the eighth wonder of the world.
Exactly. Compounding is simply the process of your investment returns generating their own returns.
People always use the phrase a snowball rolling down a hill to explain compounding, but I think that's a bit tired.
Yeah, big cliche.
I like to think of it like hiring employees. Your initial money, your principal, is your first employee. You send them to work in the market, and they earn a return. That return is essentially your first employee hiring a second employee for you.
I love that.
Now, you have two employees working. The next year, both of them earn returns, effectively hiring 4 more employees. You don't have to put any more of your own sweat into it, but your workforce is multiplying exponentially.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize the mechanism. And the reason we struggle to grasp it is that the human brain just doesn't comprehend exponential growth.
We just don't get it.
We don't. We're built to understand linear growth, 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Mark Zuckerberg once gave a great analogy for this. He noted that if you take a standard piece of paper and fold it in half 50 times, intuition tells you it might be a few feet thick.
Sounds reasonable.
But in reality, the exponential growth of folding it 50 times means that paper would reach from the Earth to the moon and back more than 10 times.
It makes absolutely no intuitive sense to us.
Not at all. But that mathematical magic is how real wealth is built. It's why Warren Buffett made over 90% of his massive fortune after he turned 65.
Wow.
He didn't find some secret stock. He just let his employees keep hiring more employees for decades.
There's even a quick shortcut to calculate this, right? The rule of 72.
Yes, the math is great here. If you take the number 72 and divide it by your expected annual return rate, it tells you exactly how many years it takes for your money to double.
So if you get just over a 7% return, your money doubles every 10 years, entirely on its own.
And the research highlights a massive, staggering mathematical example of why time is infinitely more valuable than cash when it comes to compounding.
Oh, let's hear the math.
Let's say you start investing 40 years before you want to retire. You put in just 100 pounds a month.
Okay, 100 pounds.
Over 40 years, you've contributed 48,000 pounds of your own money. Assuming a modest 5% return, that grows to 152,252 pounds.
Not bad at all.
Now, let's say your friend decides to wait 20 years to start. To try and catch up, they invest 300 pounds a month for their remaining 20 years.
So they are putting in 3 times as much per month.
Exactly. They end up contributing 72,000 pounds of their own money, significantly more cash out of pocket than you did.
Right.
But at that same 5% return, they only end up with 123,310 pounds.
Wait, really?
Really. You put in way less of your own money, but you absolutely crush them in the final total, entirely because your money had a 20-year head start to compound. Time beats cash.
Time beats cash every single time.
And this is exactly why Charles Stanley warns that you have to avoid the temptation of active trading. There was a famous warning from Buffett that goes, "A long stream of impressive numbers multiplied by a single zero always equals 0.
That is a brutal quote.
It is. If you let your overconfidence trick you into high-risk active trading and you suffer a total loss on a bad bet, you wipe out the entire compounding process. You multiply your timeline by 0, and your employees all get fired.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all these threads together, the blueprint for personal finance actually isn't about being a math genius. It's about outsmarting yourself.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
It starts by taking vague wishes and forging them into SMART goals. Then you build a realistic budget, maybe a zero-based budget, where every single dollar gets a specific job description so you can establish that initial, deeply necessary 500-pound safety net.
Absolutely.
Crucially, you have to look in the mirror and accept that your own overconfident, loss-averse brain is your worst financial enemy. And finally, you leverage the quiet, exponential power of compounding through low-cost passive ETFs to build long-term wealth. You build the machine, and then you get out of its way.
The hardest part is truly just getting out of the way. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
We just spent this entire time learning that the human brain fundamentally fails to comprehend exponential growth, which is why compounding feels like literal magic. We also learned the terrifying paradox that being highly educated in a topic can actually make you more dangerously overconfident, leading to worse decisions.
Right.
If our brains are this reliably, predictably biased when it comes to managing our money, how might these exact same cognitive blind spots, our anchoring, our loss aversion, our overconfidence, be secretly sabotaging our career decisions or our personal relationships right now?
Wow. If the logical machine has that many gremlins in the finance department, they are almost certainly messing with the steering wheel in every other department too. That is definitely something to think about next time you feel absolutely certain you are making the right choice. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning the information around you, and we'll catch you on the next one.